Welcome to Purpose Driven Church for Unificationists. We are on day 13 and we're on myth number 8. You can't learn from large churches. So, Rick Warren is talking about the idea that we shouldn't try to learn, or we can't learn from large churches because they're so big or because they're not, in line with what we're trying to do or whatever. But what he's saying is that, we should try to learn from large churches. We should try to learn from anybody that is being successful. And not necessarily to exactly copy what they do, but to look at the fundamental principles that are behind the things that they do that are working and see if we can transfer them or borrow from them into our own what we're trying to do. He says that anytime I see a program working in another church, I try to extract the principle behind it and apply it in our church. He also says, I learned a long time ago that I don't have to be original at everything for it to work. God has not called us to be original at everything. He has called us to be effective. And I think that's a very good point. The most important thing fundamentally is that what we're doing works, not where we got it from. Who cares if we had to copy somebody? If what they're doing is working, then we should try to do it too, if we can. He says that there are some things that you can't copy about Saddleback, for example. You can't transfer their context, where their location is, and the unique cultural setting there. People have tried to do that and it hasn't worked. Also, they have a particular kind of staff, and they have also Rick Warren, a special kind of person. Although he says he's just an ordinary guy, and you just can't copy those things. But he says that's fine. He says God wants you to be like yourself. God wants you to be the best version of you and really practice your skills and your gifts and your abilities that God gave you, not try to copy somebody else, even if it's somebody great. I feel like many times in our own movement, we feel like we have to be like Father. We have to live the way that he lives and sacrifice the way that he sacrificed. But I think that in reality, God gave us a certain way that we are. We're never going to be like him, but we can be like the way that God originally gifted us, the kind of person that we are meant to be. And I think that's all we can do. He says, you cannot grow a church trying to be someone else. He also talks about what you can learn from large churches. So, for example, he says, if a principle is biblical, I believe it is transcultural. It will work anywhere. And he says that at one point, at this time, they have 25 churches that they've started. And none of them are doing things exactly the way the Saddleback is. None of them are clones. He even goes on to say that the reason he calls his church Saddleback and not some generic name is because he believed that it wasn't necessarily necessary to copy exactly what they're doing, to make like 50 Saddleback churches or something like that. He says, we learn best and fastest by observing models. After all, most of what we learn in life is learned by watching someone model it. Never be embarrassed to use a model. It is a sign of intelligence. Proverbs says, the intelligent man is always open to new ideas. In fact, he looks for them. He says, I believe that people who can't learn from models have an ego problem. My goal is to learn as much as I can from as many people as I can, as often as I can. I try to learn from critics, from people I disagree with, and even from enemies. He says he talks a lot about processes, and he talks a lot about how processes are transferable, processes are copyable. He says that Saddleback started as a small church and went through a process through which it became what it is now, a healthy, large church. And so that there's essences of that process that can be used in other churches or in other settings. And methodologies. He says that every church has some methodology, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So the question is whether or not it's not whether to use a method, it's whether the methods that you're currently using are either biblical or principled and effective. And that each generation of a church must decide which methods are best to keep and which ones should be thrown away because they are no longer effective. He says that one of the most important skills of leadership is learning to distinguish between what is essential and what isn't. So he goes on to talk about primary issues of health and growth and many, many different other things. But fundamentally he says that we have to focus on, we can't lose sight of what we're trying to do and our message, even though methods are great. and we want to copy them and copy processes and things like that. But fundamentally, we have to focus on what our vision is and what we're trying to accomplish and what we're doing, and then the methods and whatnot can help us to accomplish those things. So that's very quickly, that's part one. And so tomorrow we'll start off with part two, becoming a purpose-driven church. Look forward to it. Bye.